Oh, that's a green shirt. Hey, I can see you and Tim and the chief and Fred and Valerie.
Where's Rob?
And the mayor.
See Scott?
Don't see Scott or Art.
I don't either. I see Scott.
Yeah, if you click up in the right-hand corner, JH, you can put it in gallery view, and then you'll see everyone. If you're on a laptop.
Do you see Art?
You can swap
I'm
side
on
to
the
side
iPad.
too. Swap over and you'll see everybody else.
Y'all see Art and Rob?
All right now.
Art or Rob's not on.
Well, it's just 4:59, you know. Rob will show up in a minute. Art probably forgot.
Or his batteries run down again and he doesn't have
I'll send him a quick text.
I should be parking Crossville.
How's it going, Fred?
Going okay.
Good, good, good.
I've sent them both a text, no reply.
Uh-oh. Well, we'll go ahead and start. We got a quorum, even though we can't vote on anything. So Valerie, you can keep up with the record of who's here whenever they show up.
Okay.
We'll call this meeting, this work session, May the 5th, 2020 to order digitally. And looks like the first item on the agenda is the TCRS rate, which I don't believe we have any option to do anything about. Any discussion on that from anyone? Hey, Valerie, you can put that on our agenda. The next one is the Department of Justice for grant money for purchase of police vests. Basically, that's us accepting the grant to buy vests for the police, isn't it, Chief?
That's correct. Yes, sir. It's an application for it.
Anybody got any questions on that one?
Nope.
Okay. Next one is the golf court townhomes. Counselor, if you can straighten us out on this one.
I believe so. So I've talked with the president of the Townhome Association and been working with Tim and the mayor and JH some on this, and I believe I've got a way that we can do this and make the city feel good and secure. We would do it, subject to your approval, we would enter into a contractual agreement with each of the owners as well as the townhome association, setting out that they would agree to pay this special sewer tap fee that, as Tim has set out in his proposal, which we don't know the total cost of the project yet, and we won't know until we get the actual project probably completed. That we would amortize that for them, as you said in your resolution, over a 20-year period as a special tap fee. And then we would secure our agreement with a master deed of trust that would involve each of the owners and be recorded on their properties. Now, the deed of trust would be second to any current deed of trust that's on their property, and would basically be a way in which we could accelerate payment. So to speak, I think everybody understands me, but just to go into more layman's terms, you know, they're going to pay, for example, $83 a month or $63 a month on their special sewer fee. And then if the guy in condo 154 sells to a new owner at that time, at the closing, whatever portion was prorated to that owner would have to be accelerated and paid off to the city. So if each owner owed somewhere around $15,000 at the beginning of this agreement, 5 years in, one of them sells to a new owner, and we've kept track of what they've paid, we could say to the title company or the closing agent, this owner now has, you know, $10,000 that's due and payable to the city of Crossville, and it would have to be paid upon that transaction. So we would accelerate and get some of the money back faster, and that would keep us from having to be on the hook for all of it for the 20-year potential. We would also, what I would propose is that we also approach South Cumberland Utility District and enter into an agreement with them, an interlocal agreement like we did with Crab Orchard Utility District, that says that in the event one of these customers fails to pay the sewer fee that month, then South Cumberland will also cut off the water, and vice versa. If they fail to pay the water, that will discontinue sewer service, although I'm not sure that we can actually discontinue sewer service. That's more of a question for Tim. I think if they flush the toilet, it may go down, whether we want it to or not.
That's better than it's doing now.
Yeah. So, you know, subject to your approval, we need to get some final numbers, and I need to draft contracts. I've not started on any of this yet because I wanted to see your thoughts first before we went, because it's going to be an expansive project, and we can include legal fees into this amount, as well as the cost of materials and work and everything that we're going to do. I've also wanted to take into account and get your thoughts on what happens if this place starts to build additional condominiums. Will they be allowed to be added on to the sewer, and what about potential growth on that line? Because this will ultimately probably be a blueprint for any future sewer expansion in that area.
I think at this time it would need to be limited to the 31 units that are there, because we've only got a 4-inch line or whatever it is running to town. And there, if you grow on it much more, you're going to have to look at expansion on that. And then you also mentioned that there some numbers a minute ago of an 83 or a 63. Is that just some number you pulled?
And talking to Tim can tell us more. He was looking at amortization on 15 years versus 20 years, and I had in my head it was about a $15 to $18 difference, somewhere $60 to $80 range. Is that right, Tim?
That's correct. That's in the right range.
So closer to $60 on a 15-year, or on a 20-year, closer to $80 on a 20-year or a 15-year.
Now, one of the questions that I have, Mr. Mayor, is that there are 4 or 5 people out there that just want to pay all of it up front. They don't want to They don't want any amortization. Now, they would be released from any further obligations, would they not? Their unit would not be part and parcel of any other, because they had paid for it.
That's right. We would release each owner as they paid. We would release as to their property recorder release on that deed of trust. One thing that they could be an issue between them and the homeowners association is, the homeowners association has the right to assess all the owners, and so, but that's something between them and their association. The risk to the city that I want to point out is if an individual owner is foreclosed upon, our deed of trust is going to be second to whatever the bank deed of trust and taxes are. So if the foreclosure sale does not bring enough money, on that individual unit, we may not get our payment accelerated. But ideally, absent a fire or tornado, somebody else will eventually move into that unit and start to want sewer service, and will enter into this same agreement with us.
Well, they can declare bankruptcy, Mr. Mayor, or not, but the problem is they still don't have water and sewer if they don't pay us.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So ultimately, the biggest risk is that a tornado rolls through and destroys this place, and we don't have a mechanism to recover our money if they don't rebuild it.
Has anyone got any questions?
I've got a question for Tim as far as on the actual dollar amounts. Tim, can you kind of give everybody an idea of when we would know the actual dollar amounts, so we would know how to put that into the deed of trust and figure out the amortization?
Moving forward, we will have to hire an engineer to develop the plans. Their engineer will have to develop the plans on site, so that before we can do any of our plan work, and we would actually put it out for bid and look at that low bid number to come up with the final numbers. And we're probably at least 4 months out, maybe 6, before we actually got those bid numbers.
So the resolution they passed at the last meeting should be sufficient for you to go ahead and do that. Is that correct?
Yes.
And then we will need a subsequent resolution that sets out, and I can draft that sets out exactly what we're doing and those numbers, and approval of those legal documents at that time. We can go ahead and get a preliminary contract with each owner ahead of time, though.
And then their rate would just be out of city rates on the sewer rates.
That's right. So I could have a contract ready for the next council meeting, and I'm going to work with Tim on that this week to finalize it and have that for your approval next week. And then looks like 4 months out before we can actually do the deed of trust and the rest of the deal.
Well, if we're going to move forward, I think we need to get on with it.
I got a question.
Yes, sir.
If they were to, whenever the costs come, and let's say it's higher than what we expected or whatever, and they backed out and decided they didn't want to do this, then we're going to be stuck with the cost of what we put into it to that point. I don't know if that's a possibility or not, but just asking the question.
But normally on a project like this, on the front end, they have to pay the tap fee up front. So I would say that when they sign the initial contract, we would ask them to go ahead and pay the tap fee, which is $3,450, and also pay that capacity fee, which is $30,000.
Okay.
That's $1,000 per unit. And I think that would, I think all of our engineering work and everything would be under that amount. So I think we'd be protected on the front end of that.
Okay, good.
Very well. Is there any other questions? Welcome, Art.
I'm here.
I see that. Still don't see Rob,
muted.
though. Don't know what happened, poor old Rob.
You never replied to my text.
Uh-oh. Must
He
be
was
selling.
he was in my office about 3, and I reminded him that we'd see him at 5, so I don't know what happened to him.
All right. Well, Valerie's keeping up the tally of who else here. So we'll put that item on our agenda. And what's next? Next one's right away on 112 Webb Avenue. It came before the Planning Commission back sometime in 2018 when we were closing up all the abandoned streets around. And part of that street is, or abandoned street, is being used as somebody's driveway. And the request before the Planning Commission to shut it down was denied. But then the request was, or it was modified as to where the property owner, if they wanted to survey off half of it that adjoins their property, that it was approved by the Planning Commission to move forward before us. And they would now like to do that. So it just needs our approval as to if and she's had it surveyed and done all of the things that were needed to move forward with this. So, the question is, will we allow it to be closed? And are there any questions in reference to that? It's only part of an abandoned street, what it is.
I have one comment on it. If you look at the map, there, it takes just the property that's next to her, and she obviously has spent the money and done all the work, but I think it would make sense to go ahead and extend it and abandon the other side to that other side of the property owner, because he looks like he's of course, going by the plat, it's hard to tell, but he looks like he's outside the boundaries of his property as well. And that would just end that whole shooting match and get that whole piece back on the tax rolls and not have to mess with it anytime in the future. I don't know if we can do that.
Are you talking about over to the right side where the shed is kind of back on, or the one directly south of her?
The one that's immediately next door to her. Let me see if it gives a direction on the map.
The one next to 100 Webb Avenue.
Correct. It would be, well, hers is 112. So 100 Webb Avenue would be the one that would you just extend that line across and just close that whole portion. And I don't know if you can do that without a survey or not. But it would make sense just to be done with that whole mess.
Well, I think, Mr. Mayor.
Yes, sir.
I think it makes an awful lot of sense to do that. Upon request and survey, I would certainly support it.
You remember
I
this?
think you're going to find that he's already got his shed built on the line.
It looks that way.
Do you remember any discussion on this, Counselor?
We've done several of these. We've done some without a survey, where engineering's came up with a general meets and bounds description of and we've described it as from the center line. But if this guy doesn't request it, there's got to be an acceptance of the deed. If we're going to transfer it back to him, he's got to agree to accept it. Even if we record it, it's not a complete transaction until we've got some consent from him. So,
well, if he does,
at the very least, he needs to make the request.
Well, if he doesn't accept it, can we give it all to her?
I think we might open up a can of worms there. So.
Well, looking back at the minutes from the
we have done that in the past, giving it all to one side, but the parties had to be in agreement. We did that with Gary Blue's place over here, the new Bluebird Motors. There was a side street that came in, and he and the other adjoining owner entered into an agreement and said they wanted it all to go to Gary Blue. So I think you could do it if the two property owners agreed.
Right.
I just kind of wanted that out in the open, because that at some point in time needs to be taken care of.
I'm trying to get my maps opened up here. Make sure we're all talking about the same piece of property. Keep hitting the wrong one.
Well, the fact that 100 Webb Avenue's got, it looks like it's got something actually on it. I mean,
My point exactly,
I mean,
without
kinda-
being too obvious, yes.
Yeah, I think it'd be a real good idea to ask him to let the property owner on 100 Webb Avenue know what we're doing on 112 Webb Avenue and see what he wants to do.
If he's got an encroachment on a right of way, of course you can ask him to move it if he doesn't want to request that it be that it go back to him.
We sent out letters to all the property owners asking them if they wanted to close the right of way, and all the property owners except for the one that is using it for access to the back parcel.
On Dogwood.
Yeah, on
Yeah. Yeah.
Dog wanted it closed. Even the one at 100. And after the planning commission voted on it, nobody wanted to pay for the survey except for this one lady. And that's why we're discussing her half tonight, this evening. The person at 100 Webb Avenue didn't want to pay for the surveys, my understanding. I think Kevin Dean, the planner, actually talked to that property owner.
That was the issue. And that's why I kind of hate to reward him for that, but it's an issue that needs to be taken care of.
We can contact that property owner again this week before the council meetings and see how they feel about it.
Okay.
Okay. That'll work. Let's see what's next. The next one is the utility relocations and easement acquisition on Highway 127 North, which we got the contracts to move forward on that. And the numbers should be corrected on that to be percentages by the time our meeting is. The dollar amounts, I believe, are still all the same, aren't they, Valerie?
They're pretty close, yes. It was just the sewer one that the percentages might change.
Okay. And here again, we don't have much option on that one if we want to move forward with that road project. The question is, how are we going to pay for it?
That would be a real good question, Mr. Mayor, and was wondering if we had a recommendation from the Catoosa Utility Advisory Board.
You know
They
anything?
have several
Go ahead.
times mentioned the project in their minutes, and even recommended the engineer to be hired. As far as your question goes, I don't think they actually gave a recommendation on how to pay for it.
Well, it's a $1.6 million deposit, Mr. Mayor.
I believe Fred said they had that money in their account, but once that's gone, there's not much left. Is that correct, Fred?
That's correct, yes.
Of course, with interest rates where they are, this might be a good time to borrow a little money on that one.
I'd like to know, Mr. Mayor, if TDOT would accept a bond funded by the Tennessee Municipal League where we only pay interest on the loan when a draw is made on it, i.e. the 127 South. We put up all that money and they've only drawn $200,000 or $300,000 on it. I'd like to see if there's an alternative that we can use by putting up the full faith and credit of the city of Crossville and the Tennessee Municipal League Bond Fund so that they can draw on that loan as they need it.
I think that's an excellent idea. We'll see if we can't make that happen. Hopefully get an answer before next Tuesday. Any other questions on that one?
In the contract, it states you can write a check or documentation of a deposit in the LGIP. but we can certainly double check with them to see if they would accept something like that.
When's this gotta be, what's the deadline on this, Valerie?
Yesterday or
Oh,
last week. Yeah, they're waiting on it. That the day after the council meeting, they're waiting on it.
Is that they are the ones with the signatures on the bottom of those contracts?
Yes.
Okay.
Remember, the bid letting date is supposed to be in August.
Yep. Yeah, I'd hate to slow TDOT down and delay their progress. I'm actually, I'll be happy to make some phone calls on this discussion. I'll be happy to move forward on that one on my own. But we'll leave it on the agenda and see what happens between now and then, Valerie.
Okay.
And our next one is the CARES Act funding for the airport. Looks like there's some, I guess, grant coming available there. Do you want to tell us about that, Mr. Manager?
Yes, sir. We were approached by TDOT Aeronautics and said that they expect us to be funded to the tune of about $30,000 with the CARES funding. We just want the council's approval to go ahead and apply for that grant when that application becomes available. We intend on probably just using it to fund the FBO's payments for those several months and perhaps some of the work that we did on the gas pump.
Says it can be used for development or capital improvement purposes. I think we can probably put it to use. Anybody got any questions on that one?
Let's do it.
The aeronautics bunch works a lot quicker. All right, that's all I have on my agenda. Is there anything else anyone wishes to bring up this evening?
We need to talk about having at least a virtual work session on the budget. And perhaps include the capital improvement plan on that, even though we're going to kind of put everything in a bucket and pull that out as we can afford to pay for it. We sent out the electronic budget and a couple of y'all have the printed one. As far as the revenue projections, I would ratchet those back to balance the budget. We pretty well cut it to the bone. If we need to cut more, I'm open to suggestions. But probably after the next council meeting sometime, we need to go ahead and have a work session. I know Councilmember Harrison wanted to talk about interest rates and variable versus fixed as far as some of our financing options as well, but he doesn't seem to be on the video tonight. So if y'all can put probably just
Hey, he's coming in right now. He's coming in.
Well,
We
when would
wait.
y'all like to have a virtual budget meeting?
Oh,
I'm flexible.
I'm wide open.
yeah, I pretty much am too.
Well,
Would you like to do it this week, next week, or the week after?
I can do, what's that mean? Okay. I'm wide open. I can do whenever it's good for everybody else.
You want to just email Valerie some dates, or you want us to go ahead and set a date?
let's set it.
Any dates you want, well, it's good with me.
Okay.
Except Monday morning.
here.
Time of day, 5 o'clock, earlier in the day. 5 o'clock.
5 o'clock's good for me.
5 o'clock's
Okay.
fine.
Let's say 4:30, so Rob can make it on time at 5.
Sorry, I had a sale going on,
Congratulations.
Oh, okay.
selling some timber.
Yay.
So we
Are
picked a
we,
date.
Mr. Mayor, are we talking about having this meeting in May?
Yes, we
Yep.
need to have it soon.
Get started on it.
We look good in May, except for some other work sessions and board meetings, but at 4:30 or 5 o'clock, I should be good, except for May the 18th. That's history, looks like. But I'd like to leave room if we need 2 work sessions.
Understood.
What about the 14th? The Thursday.
At 5 o'clock?
Yep.
Fine with me.
And it'll be a video budget hearing?
Yes.
Unless we're turned loose by the governor.
Works for me.
Great. Okay.
Hey, Greg, are you
Yes, sir.
hearing anything on sales tax declines or what's going on?
We've got
You have a
some
feel
numbers.
for it?
We've got some numbers from the state. We already ratcheted ours back. We may want to ratchet it back some more. We were hoping to have some March numbers in here before we got to the end of the thing. And Fred can throw his opinion in there, but already took some pretty heavy duty cuts on the budget. And I want to go ahead and take the revenues back down to match those cuts if we can, and unless we left something out. I know the one thing that we don't have in there is any kind of pay raise, and what I had proposed, and I don't know if we got it to everybody, was a graduated one-time bonus where you had the lower paid employees got a 1.5%, your mid-range got 1%, and your higher end got 0.5%, because the folks that need it are the ones that are down at the lower end. I think that would be the fairest way, and then that would not impact the pay plan that we have suspended right now.
Okay.
The first phase of that's already kicked in, correct?
Correct, and that's why you're looking at a 10-cent property tax increase that we talked about previously.
Okay.
For your information, Art, there was an article in the Town and City Government produced by MTAS that indicated a estimated state shared revenue that dropped from $1.40 to $1.26. And that's the one that we get per capita. That's why we always have these censuses every 30 minutes. But that's about a 10% drop.
That's what, 10%.
Is the number that they're looking at, but nobody knows. And we won't get March numbers till June anyway, will we, Fred?
No, that's correct. The
Yes.
last one we got in April was for February, and it was down $2,000
Over last year, I guess.
over last year's, yes.
Okay.
And I've got draconian plans. If it goes further into the fiscal year, we may have to look at doing some furloughs and cutting some other funding besides just freezing hiring, and we'll have to see how that all goes.
Now, this budget that you've given me a copy of here, Fred's got a projected fiscal year 1920 deficit of $111,878. You still feel pretty good about that, Fred? Or is that's still kind of a guess too?
Yeah,
isn't it?
I think that's kind of up in the air now that sales tax may not be coming in like we thought it was.
Yeah, you're right.
We have cut back on any assets that they were going to buy, capital stuff and things like that. So it probably will be pretty good. Yeah.
And we cut back on, and just so you don't miss it, cut paving back from 600,000 to 400,000. That's one area that we can skimp on a little bit. I hate to get behind on that, but if we get web done this year, we'll be in pretty good shape.
You may have to help the state out a little bit. No, I'm sorry. Okay. Is there anything else this evening, gentlemen?
Mayor, next week during the city attorney report, I'm going to be asking you all to approve moving forward with 2 different condemnations on utility right-of-ways for the North 127 project. Those would be City versus Realty Income Properties 25 LLC and City versus Doris Cisco. I want to give you talk about those at the work session so they're not a surprise next week.
Yeah.
The courts are still closed by order of the Supreme Court through the end of May, except for limited transactions. And so I don't plan to file these until June, assuming courts reopen, but want to go ahead and get approval to move forward with them.
And just to give you all a heads up, those were so far apart. There was no point in even trying to negotiate with them because they were just so far out of reach.
Okay. Anything else?
That's all.
Move to adjourn.
Meeting's adjourned. Thank y'all. Good to
Thank
see you, Rob.
See ya.